Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. So, last night I started to have a conversation with some friends of mine about a post that blew up in one of their groups and how it really touches on an aspect of white supremacy. And for me personally, there's basically two levels to white supremacy. You have overt white supremacy and covert white supremacy. And the line between white supremacy and casual racism against non-whites is a pretty gray area. It's very fluid to me. There's a lot of crossover. Um, but to really talk about white supremacy and how it maintains white power and, by extension, white privilege is something that we began to recognize not a lot of people are aware of. So we started asking some people in different groups, hey, what does white supremacy mean to you? And a lot of people said things like the typical answers that you would expect. Oh, that's people who support the Confederacy, white supremacists, the KKK, all these really obvious things. But almost no one talked about covert white supremacy. So, covert white supremacy is less about someone calling you a racial slur and following you around a store. This is just casual racism. Covert white supremacy is restriction in terms of restricting access to loans and to lines of credit for black people, Arabs, Asians, Latinos. It's also name-based discrimination because of internalized racism. For example, there's an acquaintance of mine. She is native out in Victoria, BC. And she has noticed that she gets very different responses based on her resume when she uses her native name versus her more white acceptable name. That sounds just vaguely ethnic, like, oh, that sounds like it's a Slavic name or something. So she will get more calls, and from the same businesses, when she gives them that resume, when it's using her white name, as opposed to her native name. White supremacy, like covert white supremacy, also looks like the underfunding of non-white neighborhoods and public transit to those areas, because a lot of poor people do need to rely on public transit, and they've found in several studies that by having better public transit, it's partially a vehicle for allowing people to get better jobs and better stability and income. It's part of the ladder of moving up. It's a way of moving up the economic ladder. Another form of this sort of covert white supremacy is a lot of anti-immigration talk that is couched in language saying, well, look, it's not about race, it's about something else. So here in Canada, for instance, back when we were getting ready to accept tens of thousands of Syrian refugees, the racists and white supremacists came out of the woodwork saying things like, oh, we can't let them in, it could be a security threat. RCMP, CSIS, and everyone say, you know what, we've run the numbers, they're not security threats. So then it became, well, we just can't handle them. And then there was a swell of public support saying, well, actually we can. And we even have this private sponsorship program that lets people crowdfund money to sponsor refugees for a year while they get settled and provides them a great way of interacting with local Canadians. Just excuse after excuse was thrown out. And it's always been thrown out. I remember back in the 90s learning in Canadian history class about the history of discrimination against the Sikhs, because like we can't let them carry kirpans, they're actually gonna come and terrorize us, it'll be Air India times 1,000. Sikhs own businesses, they represent people in parliament, one is even an official leader of the opposition. Sikhs have not caused problems in Canada. They're among our most faithful and devoted ethnicities in Canada. I constantly see Sikhs who are in some kind of police or security organization. They're in the military, they're in the RCMP, they're in police forces, they're, for security guard companies. But at the time, of course, it's, oh, well, I don't know about that. And I think we all know why. Another form of covert white supremacy are questions like, no, where are you from? Implying that if you're not white, you can't actually be from Canada, despite the fact that this nation was built on native land. Which is another thing. We still steal babies from the natives because, oh no, that's a bad situation to put those kids into. And after these kids are born, they're taken from their mothers in hospitals in the prairies or in northern Ontario and put into a foster care program where many of them get lost, and it doesn't really help anyone. There's also instances of being told, myself and some old friends of mine from high school have run into this problem a few times when we would try and apply for parts for plays. We were told that we weren't right for the part because the character we were portraying is not brown or Asian or Muslim, and oh, well, she's wearing a hijab that's very distracting. Things that were actually said. Another instance of covert white supremacy is when you have an English teacher in your high school who says something racist, and you and several other students call him out on it, but because he's the guy in charge, all three of you get sent to the principal's office, and the principal doesn't do jack shit. It's being told by white people with all these different examples that I've listed. Why do you have to make everything about race? Why does it always have to be political? Mentioning that, a couple of people in an article, just casually mentioning, oh yeah, by the way, they happen to be black, which, just nice, good to know that this is a bit of diversity and everything. And people in a comment section will lose their minds saying, why are you politicizing this? Not in my good Facebook group or not in my, YouTube comment section. Why is it always got to be about race? Why is it political? Why is it that our non-white existence is political by default? That's what I'd like to know. And if you're starting to feel a little uncomfortable by some of what I'm saying, talk to black, brown, Asian, indigenous people you know. They will tell you this, and they'll probably be very casual with you about it because it's just something we all kind of had to grow up with, and it's something we can all bond over. And it shouldn't be that way, but sadly it is. And we don't have the capacity or the maturity yet to really talk about white supremacy and its covert aspect here in the West. We can all talk openly about, oh yeah, no, overt white supremacy, like the literal neo-Nazis in the street doing the Sieg Heil and everything, and the KKK and white pride and white power and all that. Oh yeah, that is just so bad. We agree. Terrible. Like, yeah, we're gonna just try and get rid of that. That is very bad. We do not approve. And they'll wave a finger, but they won't meaningfully address the covert white supremacy that non-white people have to deal with every day. And that's what's bothering me today.